The night sky over Beirut exploded, a sudden and violent eruption that shattered the stillness of the night. It was a sudden, violent eruption, a cacophony of destruction that reverberated through the city, the air thick with the smell of cordite and concrete dust, a grim reminder of the devastation that had just unfolded. Israeli jets, sleek and deadly, screamed through the darkness, their engines roaring like harbingers of doom, their payloads destined for the heart of Dahiya, the southern suburb of Beirut, and the stronghold of Hezbollah, a place that had long been a thorn in Israel's side. This was no surgical strike, no pinpoint operation. This was an all-out assault, a declaration of war delivered in fire and fury. The intensity of the bombardment was unlike anything the city had ever seen, a relentless barrage that seemed to go on forever. The date was etched in the minds of those who witnessed the attack, date redacted. It was a night that would be remembered for generations. For years, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, had been a thorn in Israel's side, a master strategist who had outmaneuvered them time and again. His cunning and tactical brilliance had made Hezbollah a formidable force, one that Israel could no longer ignore. But tonight, Israel was determined to eliminate the threat he posed, to decapitate the organization he had built into a formidable force. The mission was clear: to strike at the very heart of Hezbollah's leadership, to cripple their command structure and send a message that would resonate throughout the region. Buildings crumbled, reduced to rubble in the blink of an eye. The destruction was swift and merciless, leaving nothing but chaos in its wake. The streets, once teeming with life, were now choked with debris and fear. The vibrant energy of the neighborhood had been replaced by a palpable sense of dread. Panic gripped the neighborhood as residents, many still in their nightclothes, stumbled through the darkness, desperate to escape the inferno. Families clung to each other, their faces etched with terror as they fled their homes. The world watched in horror as the images flickered across television screens, the raw power of the Israeli assault impossible to ignore. News anchors struggled to find words to describe the scale of the devastation. The raw power of the Israeli assault impossible to ignore. The footage showed a city under siege, its people caught in the crossfire of a conflict that seemed to have no end. This was not just an attack on Hezbollah, it was an attack on the very heart of Lebanon, a nation already struggling to maintain a fragile peace. The implications of this strike were far-reaching, threatening to destabilize the entire region. A nation already struggling to maintain a fragile peace. The political landscape of Lebanon, already fraught with tension, was now on the brink of collapse. The world held its breath, wondering what the consequences of this audacious strike would be. Leaders from around the globe called for calm, but the tension was palpable. The Middle East, a region perpetually teetering on the brink, had just been pushed closer to the edge. The balance of power was shifting, and the world could only watch and wait to see what would happen next. As dawn broke over Beirut, the true extent of the devastation became horrifyingly clear. The city, once vibrant and full of life, now lay in a state of utter desolation. The early morning light cast long shadows over the ruins, highlighting the scale of the destruction. Dahiya, once a bustling center of life and culture, lay in ruins. The streets that were once filled with the sounds of daily life were now silent. The buildings that lined them, reduced to rubble. Buildings were reduced to smoldering skeletons, their interiors exposed like open wounds. The once familiar skyline was now a jagged silhouette of destruction, with smoke still rising from the charred remains. The streets, littered with debris and twisted metal, were eerily silent, save for the distant wail of sirens and the muffled sobs of those who had lost everything. The air was heavy with the acrid smell of smoke and the metallic tang of blood. The air was thick with the stench of death and destruction. The once clear skies were now filled with a haze of smoke and dust, casting a grim pall over the city. Rescue workers, their faces grim with exhaustion, picked through the rubble, desperately searching for survivors. Their hands, covered in dust and grime, moved with a sense of urgency, knowing that every second counted. Every now and then, a cheer would erupt as a dust-covered figure was pulled from the wreckage, a small flicker of hope amidst the despair. These moments of triumph were fleeting, but they provided a glimmer of light in an otherwise dark time. But for every life saved, there were countless others lost. The weight of the tragedy was palpable, with each passing hour revealing the true cost of the attack. The human cost of the attack was staggering. The sheer number of lives lost and the scale of the destruction left an indelible mark on the city and its people. Entire families had been wiped out, their homes transformed into tombs. The grief was overwhelming, with survivors mourning the loss of loved ones and the life they once knew. Hospitals, overwhelmed with the injured, struggled to cope with the sheer number of casualties. The medical staff, though exhausted, worked tirelessly to provide care to those in need. The wounded, many with horrific burns and shrapnel wounds, lay on stretchers in corridors, their moans a constant reminder of the brutality that had been unleashed upon them. The scenes inside the hospitals were chaotic, with doctors and nurses doing their best to manage the influx of patients. The attack on Dahia was not just an attack on Hezbollah, it was an attack on innocent civilians, men, women, and children who had been caught in the crossfire. The indiscriminate nature of the violence left no one untouched. The world watched in horror as the images of the carnage played out on their television screens, the sheer scale of the destruction difficult to comprehend. News outlets around the globe broadcasted the scenes of devastation, bringing the reality of the situation into living rooms far and wide. International aid organizations quickly mobilized, sending teams and supplies to assist in the relief efforts. The global community responded with an outpouring of support, but the road to recovery would be long and arduous. Aid workers, arriving from various parts of the world, began distributing food, water, and medical supplies to the affected population. Their presence brought a semblance of hope, but the challenges ahead were immense. Among the ruins, children clung to whatever semblance of normalcy they could find. A child holding a teddy bear amidst the destruction was a poignant reminder of the innocence lost in the chaos. Despite the overwhelming grief and loss, the community began to come together, helping each other in any way they could. Acts of kindness and solidarity emerged, showcasing the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. The rebuilding efforts would take time, but the determination of the people of Beirut was unwavering. They began to clear the debris, brick by brick, determined to restore their city and their lives. The aftermath of the attack left an indelible mark on Beirut, but it also revealed the strength and resilience of its people. In the face of such devastation, they stood united, ready to rebuild and reclaim their future. To understand the true significance of the Israeli attack, one must first understand the man at the center of it all, Hassan Nasrallah. Nasrallah is not just a name, he is a symbol, a figure whose influence extends far beyond the borders of Lebanon. A charismatic and enigmatic figure, Nasrallah was more than just the leader of Hezbollah. He was a master orator, a strategist, and a man who could inspire both fear and admiration. His speeches, often broadcasted to millions, were not just words but rallying cries that resonated deeply with his followers. He was a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for many in the Arab world who saw him as a bulwark against Israeli aggression. For these people, Nasrallah represented the fight against oppression and the struggle for dignity and sovereignty. Under Nasrallah's leadership, Hezbollah had transformed from a ragtag militia into a formidable fighting force, capable of challenging Israel's military might. This transformation was not just in terms of military capability, but also in terms of organizational structure and strategic vision. He had earned the respect, even the admiration of many in the region, not just for his military prowess, but also for his social welfare programs that had earned Hezbollah widespread support amongst the Shia community in Lebanon. These programs included healthcare, education, and social services which filled the gaps left by the Lebanese state. But Nasrallah was not just a Lebanese figure. His influence and alliances extended far beyond Lebanon. He was a key player in the regional dynamics, often engaging in diplomacy and forging alliances that would bolster Hezbollah's position. He was also a key ally of Iran, a vital link in the so-called axis of resistance that stretched from Tehran to Beirut. This alliance was not just military but also ideological, rooted in a shared vision of resistance against Western and Israeli influence in the region. His fate was inextricably linked to that of the Islamic Republic, and any attack on him would be seen as an attack on Iran itself. This connection made Nasrallah a significant figure not just in Lebanon but in the broader geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. The Israeli strike on Dahia was therefore more than just an attempt to eliminate a military threat. It was a calculated move aimed at destabilizing the axis of resistance. The destruction in Dahia was a stark reminder of the lengths to which Israel was willing to go to protect its interests. It was a high-stakes move designed to weaken Iran's influence in the region and to send a message to its enemies. Israel would not hesitate to act decisively, even if it meant risking a wider conflict. This strike was a clear indication of the volatile and complex nature of Middle Eastern geopolitics, where actions are often laden with multiple layers of significance and consequence. The ramifications of such actions are far-reaching, affecting not just the immediate parties involved, but also the broader international community. The balance of power in the Middle East is delicate, and any shift can have profound implications for global stability. As the world watches, the actions of leaders like Nasrallah and the responses from nations like Israel and Iran continue to shape the narrative of the region. The international community remains on high alert, aware that the decisions made in this volatile region can ripple outwards, impacting global peace and security. Understanding the historical context and the key players involved is crucial for anyone trying to grasp the complexities of the Middle East. Figures like Hassan Nasrallah are not just leaders, they are symbols of larger movements and ideologies that have shaped, and will continue to shape, the region's history. As we look to the future, the dynamics between Hezbollah, Iran, and Israel will undoubtedly continue to evolve. The region remains a powder keg, with each action and reaction potentially setting off a chain of events that could lead to either further conflict or perhaps a path towards peace. The initial reaction to the Israeli strike was one of shock and disbelief. World leaders, caught off guard by the audacity of the attack, struggled to formulate a coherent response. Condemnation, when it came, was swift, but largely ineffectual. The United Nations, paralyzed by internal divisions, proved incapable of taking any meaningful action. The Arab world, already simmering with resentment over Israel's policies towards the Palestinians, erupted in anger. Protests, some of them violent, broke out in cities across the region. The fragile peace that had been so painstakingly constructed in the aftermath of previous conflicts threatened to unravel. The United States, Israel's staunchest ally, found itself in an awkward position. While condemning Hezbollah's actions and reaffirming its support for Israel's right to defend itself, the Bush administration also expressed concern over the escalating violence and urged restraint on all sides. But restraint was in short supply. The Israeli attack had ignited a firestorm in the Middle East, and it was unclear whether anyone had the ability, let alone the will, to extinguish it. The world watched with bated breath as the region teetered on the brink of a wider conflagration.